Kim Se-ron's life was a wildfire, bright, fierce, and impossible to ignore. From the streets of Seoul to the glitz of film festivals, she burned a path through a world that couldn't decide whether to lift her up or tear her down. Born into a city pulsing with energy, she was a girl who turned heads before she could even tie her own shoes, a spark that grew into a flame as she stepped into the spotlight. Her story isn't just about the roles she played or the cameras that followed her. It's about a journey that swung from dazzling heights to crushing lows, a tale of talent, triumph, and a tragedy that still echoes. She was a daughter, a sister, a dreamer who danced through life until the music stopped. This isn't a neat little biography tied up with a bow. It's a raw look at a young woman who lived big, fell hard, and left us wondering what might have been. Pull up a chair, because Kim Se-ron's life deserves more than a quick glance. It's a ride worth taking, from the first flicker to the final fade. Before we start, make sure you leave a subscription because it will support us a lot. Now, let's get started. Kim Se-ron came into the world on a warm summer day, July 31st, 2000, in the bustling city of Seoul, South Korea. Born in the Gireum-dong neighborhood of Seongbuk-gu, she was the oldest of three sisters, a trio that would later all dip their toes into the world of acting. Her mom, Dane, raised her in a home filled with love and encouragement, though not much is known about her dad or the quieter details of her family life. From the start, Kim had a spark, a curiosity about the world that made her stand out even as a little girl. She wasn't just another kid playing in the streets of Seoul. She was destined for something bigger, something that would take her far beyond her neighborhood. Her early years were spent at Miyang Elementary School, a place where she first started to figure out who she was. School wasn't always easy for her, though. As she began to step into the spotlight, some of her classmates didn't take kindly to her growing fame. She once shared how kids would scribble mean words about her on playground walls or even steal her shoes, leaving her to walk home barefoot. It was tough being singled out like that, but Kim had a quiet strength. She didn't let it break her. Instead, it seemed to fuel her drive, pushing her to chase something more than the everyday life around her. She loved to dance, spending her free time twirling and moving with friends and a teacher who saw her potential. That joy in movement, in expressing herself, hinted at the performer she'd soon become. By the time she was 9, Kim's life took a sharp turn into the world of show business. It started small, with a gig as a child model for a parenting magazine in 2001. She was just a toddler then, barely old enough to understand what a camera was, but her bright eyes and natural charm caught people's attention. That tiny step opened a door she'd soon charge through. In 2009, she landed her first real acting role in a movie called A Brand New Life. Directed by a French-Korean filmmaker named Uni Leconte, the film told a story that hit close to home for Kim. She played Jin-hee, a 9-year-old girl left at an orphanage by her father after he remarried, only to be adopted later by a French couple. The role was heavy for someone so young, but Kim brought it to life with a raw, honest energy that stunned everyone who saw it. She wasn't just acting, she was living that character's pain and hope. That movie didn't just mark her debut, it launched her into a whole new world. She got to travel to the Cannes Film Festival that year, walking the red carpet as the youngest actress ever invited. Imagine that, a little girl from Seoul, not even in double digits, rubbing shoulders with the biggest names in film. It was a whirlwind, a taste of the big time that showed her what was possible. Back home, she kept her nose to the grindstone, moving on to Yangil Middle School in Ilsan. She graduated there in February 2016, balancing school books with scripts, proving she could handle more than most kids her age ever dreamed of. Around the same time she was navigating middle school, Kim's career kicked into high gear with her next big role. In 2010, she starred alongside Won Bin in The Man from Nowhere, a gritty crime flick that became a massive hit in South Korea. She played Young So-mi, a tough little girl caught up in a dangerous mess after her mom gets tangled with a crime ring. Filming wasn't easy. She could only watch her own scenes on the monitor, keeping the darker parts of the story out of her young eyes, but she nailed it. Her chemistry with Won Bin, a huge star, was electric and audiences couldn't get enough. That role didn't just make her a familiar face, it showed she had real talent, the kind that could carry a movie. Life at home stayed pretty normal despite her growing fame. She had two younger sisters, Aaron and Yeron, who looked up to her and eventually followed her into acting. The three of them shared a tight bond, and Kim loved having her Siamese cat Chaldeok around for company. She kept dancing too, finding peace in the rhythm and motion when the cameras weren't rolling. School kept her grounded. She later enrolled at the School of Performing Arts Seoul, a place known for shaping stars. In 2018, she took another big step, getting into Chungang University to study performing arts and film studies. It was clear she wasn't just coasting on early success, she wanted to learn, to grow, to build something lasting. For Kim Se-ron, those early years weren't just a beginning. They were the foundation of a journey that would take her places no one could have predicted. After her breakout roles as a child, Kim Se-ron didn't just coast on early fame, she hit her stride in her teenage years and early 20s, turning into one of South Korea's most promising young stars. By the time she was stepping into high school at the School of Performing Arts Seoul, her career was already a whirlwind of big projects and bigger opportunities. She'd proven she could hold her own with heavy hitters, and now she was ready to take the lead, showing the world what she could do when the spotlight was hers alone. These years weren't just busy, they were golden, a stretch where everything seemed to click for her, from blockbuster films to awards that piled up like trophies on a shelf. One of her brightest moments came in 2014 with a movie called Manhole. At 14, Kim took on the starring role as Soo-jung, a deaf girl caught in a terrifying game of survival against a serial killer lurking in the sewers beneath Seoul. It was a wild switch from her earlier, more innocent characters, and she dove into it head first. The film wasn't a massive hit, but critics couldn't stop talking about her. She carried every scene with a mix of grit and vulnerability that made you forget she was still just a kid. That same year, she popped up in a music video for the boy band Block B, playing a love interest in their track Jackpot. It was a small gig, but it showed how she could light up a screen even in a few minutes, her charm pulling eyes no matter the project. Then came 2016, a year that cemented her as a force to be reckoned with. She starred in The Great Actor, a comedy about a struggling actor named Jang Nok-soo, played by Oh Dal-soo, who gets jealous of a child star stealing his thunder. Kim was that child star, Park Ji-soo, and she played her with a sly, playful edge that had audiences laughing in their seats. The movie did well at the box office, and Kim's knack for comedy started turning heads. She wasn't just the sad-eyed girl from her early roles anymore. She could make you laugh, too. That versatility was her secret weapon, and it kept casting directors knocking on her door. Television started calling louder around this time, and Kim answered with some of her best work yet. In 2017, she took a lead role in the KBS drama Mirror of the Witch. Set in a fantasy version of Korea's Joseon era, the show followed a cursed princess named Hyo Myung, played by Kim, who teams up with a young healer to break the spell ruining her life. The costumes were lavish, the story was gripping, and Kim was magnetic. She brought a regal fire to the princess, blending strength with a quiet ache that hooked viewers week after week. The drama was a hit, and it earned her a nomination for Best New Actress at the KBS Drama Awards. She didn't win, but being in the conversation at 17 was proof she was climbing fast. The awards started rolling in for real soon after. In 2018, she snagged the Popularity Award at the Korea Drama Awards for her work in Mirror of the Witch and other projects piling up on her resume. That same year, she joined the cast of Love in the Moonlight, a historical romance that had fans buzzing. She played Sang-hwa, a sharp-witted court lady, and even in a supporting role, she stole scenes with her quick charm. The show was a smash, and Kim's star kept rising. She was everywhere: movies, TV, even hosting gigs like the 2017 DMC Festival, where she stood on stage with confidence beyond her years, smiling as the crowd cheered. Her film work didn't slow down either. In 2019, she starred in A Girl at My Door, a raw drama where she played Doohee, a girl abused by her stepfather and rescued by a tough policewoman, played by Bae Doona. The movie tackled dark, messy stuff, and Kim's performance was haunting. She didn't shy away from the ugliness, letting every bruise and tear feel real. Critics loved it, and it added another layer to her growing reputation as an actress who could do anything. She followed that up with lighter fare, like the 2020 Netflix series The School Nurse Files, where she played a quirky student tangled in supernatural shenanigans. It was weird, it was fun, and Kim shone as the straight-faced heart of the chaos. Through it all, she kept her feet on the ground. She was studying at Chungang University by then, juggling scripts with textbooks, and still made time for her sisters and her cat. Her Instagram lit up with goofy selfies and dance clips, showing a girl who loved her craft but didn't let it swallow her whole. These were her glory days. Years where every role felt like a win, every award a nod to her hustle. Kim Se-ron wasn't just a child star anymore. She was a name, a talent, a young woman owning her moment. Kim Se-ron's life took a dark turn in the years leading up to her tragic end, a stark contrast to the bright promise of her earlier days. By 2022, she was no longer the wide-eyed child star dazzling audiences with her talent. At 22, she was navigating the pressures of adulthood, fame, and a career that had hit a rough patch. That May, everything unraveled when she crashed her car into a roadside electrical transformer box in Seoul. She'd been drinking, her blood alcohol level was well over the legal limit, and the wreck knocked out power to nearby businesses, leaving chaos in her wake. She fled the scene, a decision that only deepened the hole she was digging for herself. When the police caught up with her, the damage was done, not just to the transformer but to the reputation she'd spent years building. The fallout was immediate and brutal. South Korea doesn't mess around with drunk driving, especially when it's a celebrity behind the wheel. Kim faced a firestorm of public outrage. Fans who'd once adored her turned venomous, and the media smelled blood. She issued a handwritten apology the next day, her words shaky and raw, admitting her mistake and begging for forgiveness. It wasn't enough. The court fined her 20 million won, about $13,850, and her career took a nosedive. She stepped down from a drama called Trolley, a role she'd been excited about, and even her scenes in Netflix's Bloodhounds got slashed after the backlash refused to die down. Offers dried up fast. Directors didn't want the headache, and the public didn't want her back on their screens. She was radioactive, a star fallen so hard the glow was gone. Money troubles piled on quick. She'd been living big, fancy apartments, nice clothes, but the work wasn't there to keep it up anymore. Word got around she owed her old agency, gold medalist, a hefty 700 million won, $500,000 or so, debt from contracts and advances she couldn't pay back now that the checks had stopped coming. She took a job at a coffee shop, pouring lattes for minimum wage, a far cry from red carpets and flashing cameras. People sneered at that too. Online, they called her a fake, saying she was playing poor for sympathy while secretly living it up. Every Instagram post, her laughing with friends, sipping a drink, got twisted into proof she wasn't sorry enough. The hate was relentless, a tidal wave she couldn't swim out of. Kim tried to claw her way back. She'd finished filming a movie called Guitar Man in late 2024, playing a singer in an underground band, and there was Every Day We Are, a sweet high school story with her as a basketball-loving teen. Both were in the can, waiting for release, a flicker of hope she might reclaim her spot. But the shadow of that DUI clung to her like damp clothes. She'd pop up in the news every few months, rumors about a mystery boyfriend, whispers she'd secretly married, all nonsense that kept her name tied to drama instead of talent. Friends said she was crumbling under it. She'd always been quiet, the kind of person who kept her hurts to herself, But now she was pulling away even more, retreating into a shell no one could crack. Then came February 16th, 2025. It was a Sunday afternoon in Seoul, gray and cold, when a friend showed up at her place in Gyeongdong-gu. They'd made plans to hang out, nothing big, just a catch-up. The friend knocked, waited, then let themselves in when no one answered. That's when they found her. Lifeless, sprawled out in her apartment, no sign of a fight or a break-in. It was 4:50 p.m. when the call went out to the police. A frantic plea for help that came too late. Cops swarmed the scene, combing through her home for clues. No note, no obvious explanation, just a stillness that didn't fit the girl who'd once danced through life. By Monday, they'd made up their minds. Suicide. She'd made what they called an extreme choice, a phrase that landed like a punch. The investigation kept going, but the why was already haunting everyone who'd known her. Her death hit like a thunderclap. Fans who'd stuck by her sobbed online, posting old clips of her smiling, while others who'd trashed her went silent, maybe ashamed, maybe just stunned. Her dad broke down at the funeral, pointing a trembling finger at a YouTuber he blamed for pushing her over the edge with cruel videos. The industry mourned, too. Co-stars like Channy from SF9 shared childhood photos, their faces soft with grief. Kim Se-ron was gone at 24, a life snuffed out too soon, leaving behind 2 sisters, a cat named Chaldeok, and a stack of unreleased films no one knew if they'd ever see. Her story didn't end with applause. It ended with a question no one could answer. Kim Se-ron's death wasn't just a single moment. It was the end of a long, slow spiral that had been tightening around her for years. When you peel back the layers of what happened, it's not hard to see how the pieces came together, each one pressing down on her until there was no room left to breathe. That DUI in May 2022 wasn't the start of her troubles. It was the match that lit a fire already waiting to burn. She'd been riding high for so long, a young woman who'd built a career most could only dream of. But fame's a tricky thing. It lifts you up fast and drops you even faster when the crowd turns. And turn they did, with a fury that didn't let up. The crash itself was a mess. Her car smashing into that transformer box, the power outage, her stumbling away from the wreckage. But what came after was worse. South Korea's a place where public image matters more than most spots on the map. And Kim's mistake wasn't just a crime, it was a betrayal. Fans who'd cheered her on since she was a kid felt personally stung, like she'd let them down after they'd invested years in her. Social media lit up with venom, people calling her reckless, spoiled, a disgrace. It wasn't just criticism, it was a pile-on. Thousands of strangers tearing into her every move. Her apology, scribbled out in her own hand, didn't cool the heat. If anything, it gave them more to pick apart. Too late, too rehearsed, not sorry enough. She couldn't win. That public shaming didn't happen in a vacuum. The industry she'd grown up in turned its back, too. Dropped from trolley, cut down in bloodhounds, her name became a liability overnight. She'd spent her life working toward those roles, pouring herself into every script, and now it was gone. Money dried up fast. Rumors of that $700 million debt to her agency weren't confirmed, but they didn't need to be. The story fit the narrative. A fallen star who'd spent too much, lived too large, and couldn't handle the crash. Working at that coffee shop wasn't a comeback. It was survival, and even then, people twisted it into a stunt. Every step she took to rebuild got stomped on, leaving her stuck in a hole she couldn't climb out of. Then there was the quieter stuff, the weight she carried off screen. Kim had always been private, the kind of person who smiled for the camera but kept her real self tucked away. Friends hinted she'd been struggling long before the DUI. Maybe the pressure of growing up in the spotlight. Maybe the exhaustion of balancing school and stardom. She'd lost her mom years back, a blow that didn't make headlines but surely left a mark. Her sisters were close, but they were younger, leaning on her more than she could lean back. When the world turned on her, that isolation must have deepened. She stopped posting as much, her Instagram going from goofy updates to rare, strained snapshots. The girl who'd loved dancing didn't seem to move like that anymore. The online hate didn't help. YouTubers and trolls smelled weakness and pounced, churning out videos and posts that ripped her apart. Her dad blamed one of them at her funeral, saying those words pushed her past breaking. It's hard to measure that kind of thing, how much a cruel comment can weigh on someone already drowning, but it's not hard to imagine it chipping away at her. She was 24, young enough to have time to recover, but old enough to feel like she'd lost everything she'd built. Those unreleased films, Guitar Man and Every Day We Are, were supposed to be her way back. Maybe she saw them as a lifeline, a chance to rewrite the story. But waiting for them to drop, with no guarantee anyone would care, could have felt like shouting into the wind. Suicide's a jagged thing to unpack. The police called it an extreme choice, but that doesn't explain the how or the why. No note, no clear trigger, just a Sunday afternoon when she decided she'd had enough. Maybe it was the debt, the stalled career, the endless judgment. Maybe it was something deeper, a hurt she'd carried since she was a kid on a playground with stolen shoes. What's clear is she didn't get the space to heal. South Korea's unforgiving culture, the industry's cold shoulder, the internet's relentless noise, it all boxed her in. Kim Se-ron's tragedy wasn't just her death, it was the slow crush that came before, a fall from grace she couldn't outrun. Her story's a warning. Fame can build you up, but it's just as quick to tear you down, and not everyone makes it out the other side. Kim Se-ron's story doesn't end with a credits roll or a standing ovation. It stops sharp, leaving a silence that's tough to sit with. She was a force, a girl who turned a childhood dream into a career that lit up screens and lives, only to watch it unravel in a way no script could have predicted. Her days were a mix of applause and ashes, a dance between what she built and what broke her. By the time the curtain fell, she'd given us more than just movies. She'd shown us the cost of shining too bright in a world that's quick to judge and slow to forgive. What's left is a tangle of questions, an ache for the laughter and roles we'll never see. Her life wasn't perfect, wasn't simple, but it was hers, and it mattered. As the smoke clears, Kim Se-ron lingers, not as a cautionary tale or a faded star, but as a reminder of what it means to chase something big, to stumble, and to leave a mark anyway. She's gone, but her echo sticks around, a quiet call to look closer at the flames we cheer for and the ones we let burn out. What do you think about this tragedy? Leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out on more interesting content about the dark side of the entertainment industry. Goodbye, and see you again.